Majora's Mask, just like the rest of the Legend of Zelda series, is something that I would consider a masterpiece. Practically every mainline title brings something fun, creative, and remarkable to the table, which has cemented the Zelda series as my favorite in all of video gaming. With the recent release of Breath of the Wild, the Zelda franchise seems to be traveling down a new path that would define several sequels, much like it did over 20 years ago with Ocarina of Time. However, I've always felt the second N64 Zelda title was the game that served as one of the most noteworthy in defining entries not simply through its gameplay, but the atmosphere it established. So here's the thing. I actually recognize both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask as my favorite games of all time. My opinion almost changes by the week on which one I consider to be better, so I put both of these titles on that pedestal. In regards to this video's topic, Majora's Mask is the central focus, yet Ocarina of Time is imperative to understanding what makes its successor such a special title to myself and millions of people. I don't think there's any denying how much of an impact Ocarina of Time had on the gaming industry as well as the future of the Zelda franchise. Z-targeting, expansive environments that yielded puzzles in a 3D perspective, and a larger focus on an immersive story and world with its implementation of cutscenes. In some ways, Ocarina of Time takes a grittier, more atmospheric approach to the world of Hyrule than previous entries, as emphasized through its eerie temples and the graphical fidelity. Although the approach might be varied, Ocarina of Time is not bereft of wonder and charm, as you still have plenty of triumphant music and heartfelt moments. So, with Ocarina's resounding success, the big question became, what could the Zelda series do at this point to be different or stand out as another excellent entry? Fast forward to early 2000, you're sitting in your room watching television, and then you're greeted with this commercial. One home. What the hell did I just watch? As this crazy trip of an ad made clear, this isn't your typical Zelda title. Majora's Mask is carried by this dark premise that is underlined by this hilariously pissed off moon that threatens the world of Termina with a great conflagration as it slowly moves to collide with the land. And it's that blend of quirkiness and uneasiness that exemplifies the tone of Majora's Mask. With literature and narratives, tone is typically defined as the attitude or mood that dictates the overall feeling of the work, as desired by the author. Majora's Mask conveys its profoundly somber and unsettling tone through its colorful environments and cast, utilization of a dark premise and themes, and escalation of scenarios due to the game's engaging time mechanic. Even the design of the mask itself is indicative of this concept, as the cursed object is composed of a variety of colors, yet they all blend well together into a dark array. The pieces that draw the viewer's attention are the bright glowing eyes that shine through the surrounding dark colors, just as the funny strange moments of the game act as beacons amongst the grim, overbearing circumstances. The tone of Majora's Mask is carefully woven into all of its elements to make it such a tight, well-composed experience that people remember so fondly. Initially, I'd like to begin by examining the more aesthetical parts of Majora's Mask, like the art and the music, before delving into the narrative aspects. But without further ado, let's begin. Let's start by going over some of the basics to understanding Majora's Mask, and then moving into the artistic components that communicate the game's tone. Following the events of Ocarina of Time, this title sees Link looking for a lost friend, which we can assume to be Navi, and finding himself in the strange world of Termina. Link has a run-in with the Skull Kid, who steals his ocarina, hijacks Epona, transforms him into a Deku scrub, and has plagued this new land with his mischief and, oh yeah, a moon with a face on a direct collision course with the ground. So your role is to stop the Skull Kid and return Majora's Mask, which he possesses to the happy mask salesman, a familiar face who I swear looks way too much like a Titan. Once leaving the clock tower, you'll eventually run into Skull Kid at the tower's peak on the final day, where his other fairy tale speaks of 4 locations across Termina that'll be our temple destinations. After retrieving the Ocarina of Time and resetting the cycle, it's time to journey into the colorful, far-reaching corners of Termina to break the curse of each temple and stop Skull Kid. On the subject of colors, I believe one of Majora's Mask's greatest strengths is the exceptionally strong palette and its implementation, which is highlighted by heavy shadows. Of course, purple is the most prevalent color, but take a look at some of these environments, such as the Deku Palace and the Mountain Village during the summer. These vivid colors are nothing like what you would see in Ocarina of Time with its tamer style, and I think Majora's Mask is only better because of it. These locations are absolutely breathtaking and made all the more memorable due to how distinct the colors are. Even the tiny details like wall textures and lighting really accentuate these areas. As days progress in the land of Termina, places can offer a different feeling based on the hues each day presents. For example, Great Bay on the first day is bleaker with its dull colors and honestly resembles something more akin to Ocarina of Time style. As you move into day 2, the colors become much more vibrant until we reach day 3 where it's downright apocalyptic. This illustrates how the colors and hues aren't just used for building a connection between the player and location, but showing the escalation of the circumstances and making each day feel different from the last tonally. This daily variance is something I'd like to touch upon more, but for now let's examine the official art of Majora's Mask and how it encapsulates the game's tone. Examining several illustrations from both the N64 and 3DS versions will reveal some crazy colors that are contrasted by these really large, dark shadows. For comparison's sake, Ocarina of Time's artwork has a really nice palette, but the shadows are pretty light and you can see the transition of colors distinctly. Majora's Mask, on the other hand, feels drastically different, with very abrupt shading transitions and the colors feeling much more vibrant. This duality between eye-catching colors and striking shadows really epitomizes Majora's Mask's integration of crazy NPCs and environments, with the dark themes and concept always present and looming as a central component of the game's tonal identity. Alright, with the next artistic category, it's no secret that I love video game music, and the scores are a huge part of the Zelda series identity. So how exactly does Majora's Mask melodies perform in both enhancing the tone and as a standalone soundtrack? Well, it's unquestionably outstanding. There are some returning songs like Song of Time, Kuma and Katake's theme, and the amazing Shop Song. And Majora's Mask soundtrack has a plethora of songs that all give off different vibes, but resonate with the game's overall tone. You have super lively songs like Deku Palace, ominous ones like the Giant's theme, and then weird songs like Camaro's Dance, which also happens to be associated with the best mask in the game. Majora's theme is a perfect example of this strange yet creepy atmosphere the game conveys with how the melody flows erratically and its inclusion of symbols. Majora's theme is also worked into the tunes of each of the 4 major areas to demonstrate the thematic progression that Majora's Mask uses so well. The main overworld theme for Termina is a wonderful rendition of the Legend of Zelda theme, but once you enter an area like the Southern Swamp or Icona Valley, the music morphs into a song that involves a variation of Majora's theme in some parts, along with features that suit the respective area. Great Bay uses a lighter, coastal set of instruments, while Icona Valley uses a menacing vibe with a choir that emulates that of Ocarina of Time's Shadow Temple. It's very effective in immersing the player into the area and illustrating history and an air of misfortune that obscures some of the whimsical sights Majora's Mask is known for. However, once you complete the main objective of an area by defeating the boss that lies at the end of the temple, the variation changes into the victorious song that accompanies the overworld. Such a transition represents the restoration of peace and a symbol of the interconnected nature of Termina. Continuing the concept of thematic progression established by Termina's 4 corners is the application of Clocktown's theme, where 3 distinct versions slowly change and grow in intensity as the days progress. Take the song from Clocktown's first day, for example. It's incredibly upbeat, remarkably catchy, and makes you feel at ease. The second day's theme moves at a noticeably faster tempo, almost like it's racing and building tension, like the songs that play when Sonic is drowning or the timer is running out in Super Mario Bros. There also feels like there are less instruments, or at least less impactful ones woven into the background, which could be representative of the scarcity of Clocktown's denizens due to their desire to flee impending doom. As for the third day, we're now moving at ludicrous speed through the song, and a dark foreboding tone grows and surges in the back. Although it's not a part of the triad, the escalation reaches this climax in the form of a song that plays when the clock strikes 12 on the closing day. Final Hours. Final Hours at its core is a complete anomaly and oxymoronic in nature. Give it a listen. It's haunting but calming, soothing yet stressful, the finale and the dawn. I find that words can't fully describe the raw emotion this melody radiates, but I can say without a doubt that this song embodies Majora's Mask. To blend concepts of abnormality that lead to mixed feelings of uneasiness and whimsy into the game through characters in the world is one thing, but to blend that into a song is a completely different challenge. It's a fantastic song that holds so much weight and perfectly captures Majora's tone. There's another triad of songs that also exhibits this rising quality, but I'll hold off on that until later. For now, I think it's best to examine even deeper into the world of Termina and how its many characters are connected. A large part of Majora's Mask's identity resides in the inhabitants of Termina, their troubles, and the path to assisting them. As I mentioned, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask are deeply woven together, which can be plainly seen through the reused character models and assets from Majora's predecessor. In an interview with Zelda series producer Eiji Aonuma from Game Informer, Aonuma had this to say on the subject of the reused models. "I think a lot of it comes down to those character models having the ability to express something that they couldn't in the setting of Ocarina, because we had this very different image for the world where Majora's Mask takes place. Even though these characters have a similar appearance to the version of them that appeared in Ocarina, they express something different in a different world." This quote contains the heart and soul of Majora's Mask that has served as the catalyst for plenty of fan theories about parallel worlds and the 5 stages of grief, which is a subject for another time. The approach of reutilizing assets allows for more personality and life to be given to these characters in Termina. In Ocarina, these carpenters are seen near the end of the game and are just some random people you save from imprisonment in the Gerudo Fortress. In Majora's, well, they're still carpenters with goofy walk cycles and this weird headspin, but they play a larger role in showing the unrest of Clocktown's people through scenes like the mayor's office. There's also this woman who is a simple cuckoo lady with ties to other NPCs for smaller side quests in Ocarina. But in Majora's, she's Anju, and a key character in what is likely the most touching and heartfelt side quest in the Zelda series. What these character interactions and dilemmas add up to is establishing that Link has been thrown into a dire situation and has to take on the role of the hero again. The land's many people have countless issues that continuously portray how cruel of a world Termina is, and a large majority don't feel like unnecessary add-ons, but rather naturally ingrained into the world and setting. When you assist these people, there's a satisfaction that comes with helping them, whether it's easing the pain of a wounded soul, fulfilling the wish of a sorrowful man, or giving a random hand toilet paper. Nevertheless, regardless of how many people you help out, that timer is still counting down, and soon you'll have to restart the cycle with the Song of Time, which really emphasizes what I believe is the most humanizing aspect of Majora's Mask. You cannot help everyone. And I think once that idea dawns on the player and they realize that their efforts are only a temporary fix, the grim, melancholy tone of Majora's Mask that the environments and characters ooze begins to settle. Even though the solutions are temporary and those people might not remember anything about your involvement in their life and final wishes, you carry a reminder of your role, whether it be through the form of a mask or an item. That right there is the strength of the wide catalog of masks, to display the fruits of your journey and further demonstrate how deep, twisted concepts lie behind colorful, visually enticing representations. I've always loved how goofy these characters were in Ocarina of Time, with their ridiculous walk cycles, language, and just how random they can be, but this title cranks it up a notch. This crazy loincloth man dancing on a mushroom at midnight, that one beaver with the crazy eyes that look like poker chips, the Gorman brothers with their hilarious battle cry. They're all really funny and memorable because of at least one circumstance around them, which is the key to making well-developed side quests. A lot of times in games, the NPCs could be copy and pasted or lack something in their design or personality that makes them anything special. That's where Majora's Mask steps in to introduce its unique cast that entices you to do side quests, despite the game practically being over 50% side quests. Majora's characters also don't feel lifeless since their weirdness integrates them well into the world and their dialogue actually changes day by day. For example, this swordsman here will boast about how he will jump up and cut the moon in half, and then he's cowering in the back room of his shop during the final night. Or how about the postman that's having a mental breakdown because he wants to flee, but it's his job as a carrier that defines him. Hell, even the bombers stick around undeterred by anything going down. These kids might be racist, but they're not afraid of shit. There's one final detail I'd like to point out, which happens when you observe Majora atop the clock tower when you look through the observatory's telescope. On the first and second day, he just looks at you and then he shakes his butt and jumps up to the moon. Disrespectful, but not really out of character. However, if you look for the telescope at Majora on the final day, he'll be twitching and kind of hunched over in a very strange position, which almost looks like he's possessed or corrupted. It's a small detail like that that I don't really see that many people talk about, and I think is incredible for establishing the character as well as how the danger is approaching. But overall, it's these types of reactions that give these characters personality and also emphasize the dark fate of Termina. With the wide selection of quests and characters to pick from, there are a couple I'd like to focus on that I feel really showcase Majora's parallel tone. First up is Miko, the Zora guitarist that is injured on the Great Bay Coast. He looks to be in really bad shape once brought to the beach and has one final message to give. You'd think it'd be delivered in a slow, raspy manner like his current status and vocal clips would imply, but no, he just stands up and starts jamming on his guitar while making the funniest noises. This is the classic Majora's Mask way of bringing some levity to a bad situation with a really unexpected twist of events that just fades right back into the state of anguish as illustrated with his collapse. But once you play the Song of Healing to ease his pain, you're presented with one of Majora's Mask's best composed and stunning scenes. Miko floats along in a vast darkness and doesn't seem to be conscious at all until Lulu floats in parallel to him. At that moment, his eyes snap wide open, and 2 stage lights engulf them as the camera twists. I see the expansive dark background as a symbol of the state of Termina, as wrought by Skull Kid. It seems hopeless, and there's nothing to stop not only your personal struggles, but the inevitable moon on the way. Yet, the stage lights represent how the help of others can put you back on the right path and stand out amongst the dark around you. I think this is demonstrated through Lulu's light coming on first, Miko shortly after, and then those of the other band members near the end. Once Miko believes that Lulu doesn't blame him for the strange circumstances of the eggs and their kidnapping, he feels at peace. And the depiction we see of lights in the dark is a perfect illustration of Majora's tone, a depressing atmosphere that contains a handful of joyous and absurd instances. Next up is Ikana Castle and its king, Egos du Ikana. As usual, there are moments of humor when the king becomes completely distracted for several seconds by your captain's hat, or when he makes those weird noises when teaching you the Oath to Order. Yet this battle and setting is further support of how well Majora's Mask blends its tone and carrying theme into scenarios. The battle initially takes place among the king's 2 lackeys in an incredibly dark room with only 2 sources of light that have been concealed. The battle is also led with a speech from the king where he implies that the darkness in this very room and that engulfs him is the truth. Over the course of the battle, you reveal the light in the room literally when you burn the shades, and figuratively when you show the king the true error of his ways. Just like most denizens of Termina, you are helping them through their own torment, but this situation differs because the king is convinced that he doesn't need help. But when you guide him out of the toxic mindset he's fallen prey to, he's thankful and becomes another example of a light shining in the land of Termina, as evident when he says to Link, "You who bring light into darkness," and how it has been cast upon them. Without further ado, last but not least, we have Anju and Kafei. This quest is notorious for being one of the most touching, fulfilling moments in a Zelda title, and for good reason. Anju is saddened because her fiancé has disappeared, which can be seen through brief interactions in the Stockpot Inn. Once you talk to Anju with Kafei's mask received from his mother, Madame Aroma, she immediately lights up and asks to meet about her fiancé that night. After receiving a letter and putting it in the mailbox, you'll be given the chance to meet Kafei, who has been cursed by the Skull Kid and reverted into a child. Kafei doesn't want to meet Anju yet since his wedding mask was stolen by this dirtbag, and probably because he's afraid of confronting her as a child. I can sympathize with his decision since it's likely a scenario where Kafei has drifting thoughts that Anju will love and accept him no matter what. But deep down, there's a fear of rejection if he were to meet her in his current state and without a mask. It would be a poor representation of who Kafei is as a person, both physically and personality-wise. But with the news delivered to him by Link and to Surge of Hope, he seems to gain confidence and shed his fear, which is symbolized by Kafei giving up the Keaton's mask. You take the pendant Kafei hands over to Anju as a sign of his promise that advises her to wait in Clocktown. As for Kafei, you'll find him outside of Sakuron's hideout in the east side of Ikana Valley, and he should show up with only a few hours to spare. So long as you didn't. Hello, do arrows? I want to see if arrows work on. Holy shit! He blew. Oh no! Oh no! I'm sorry. Oh no! I don't even get a reward. He's just dead. He's dead. Once inside the secret base, it's almost like a predecessor to the Spirit Tracks, where you switch between Kafei and Link to complete puzzle and combat sections respectively to get Kafei's wedding ceremony mask. From there, it's a race against the clock to the Stockpot Inn to witness the reunion. An excellent topper to this whole side quest is how Anju is waiting calmly in the room despite all the shakes and dangers she's put herself in, and once you arrive, that's all you can do as well. The timer starts getting really low, and it makes you really nervous that Kafei won't make it in time, and you're going to be forced to play the Song of Time. So what this segment does so well is passively makes you anxious and stressed in a way that actually makes you fearful of the outcome. There's not any other moment in the game that requires you to cut it this close to the deadline, which makes this quest so effective in having the imminent threat fully realized. Finally, Kafei shows up with a little more than an hour to spare, and the lovers are given their happy, albeit really sad ending. Their love gives you the couple's mask, and it's great to have played such a role in their reconnection, but they mention how they will stay to greet the morning sun, which is terribly dark. At last, they achieved the one wish they had, and with that they welcome death, so long as it's together. This game was rated E. Despite its lack of humor or oddities, Kaveh and Anju's reunion is the pinnacle of Majora's Mask's message. Happiness can be found in a world of sorrow and troubles with help from others. And there is still some pain at the end knowing that nothing you've done will truly remain until you've put an end to Skull Kid's schemes. It's a reminder that using opposing feelings can work in tandem to really strengthen one another. For example, Majora's Mask's moments of happiness and absurdity work so well within the dark tone that enshrouds Termina because they serve as a breath of fresh air or an example that heightens world building since we as the player can understand why Skull Kid needs to be stopped. Yet that goal is only achieved through another meeting with Skull Kid at the clock tower, once all the pieces are in place. Once all 4 of the remains have been gathered and perhaps all of the masks, it's time to return to the clock tower for the final showdown. At the tower's top, there's this really surreal feeling where you feel confident and kind of powerful since you've experienced this before and seem to be the only one fully in control with the ocarina. Tattle's dialogue changes a bit, Skull Kid repeats his speech, and then you play the giant song to stop impending doom from a rock that resembles that really buff fish from SpongeBob. What comes after is a fantastic moment where the ground starts shaking and Skull Kid looks around confused, which is followed by the call of the giants. Skull Kid just starts freaking out, and you could tell that he, or it, is in a lot of stress. Right before he lets out a cry, there's a small ting sound effect that makes you question whether this reaction is Skull Kid snapping back into reality, recognizing the horrors he's caused and trying to break free, or something else growing fearful that it'll be stopped. The giants come in and in a really lovely moment stop the moon from causing mass destruction. If you try to play the giant song with any less than all 4, then they will be unable to halt its progress, forcing another Song of Time restart. But with the moon stopped, it looks like the game is over. The colors of the sky start to slide into those of the early morning. Skull Kid has been stopped, and happy music plays. And then Majora's Mask's line of unnerving twists happen. Majora's Mask interjects into Tattle and Tails' conversation in this really ominous off-screen shot, which is hinted at through the language used and the white text presenting a stark contrast to the pair of blue and purple. Majora tosses Skull Kid away like a mere puppet and ascends to the moon while this really stressful song plays. In one of my favorite shots, the moon eyes reignite and it says, I shall consume everything. Which is just spine-chilling. Most of Majora's Mask's most notable quotes come from here on out, which speaks volumes to how unforgettable and stunning this sequence of events is. After giving chase into the moon, we're presented with the most beautiful area in the entire game. A bright sun hangs above and the sky is a clear, clean blue with a sea of clouds on the edges of the plain. A lone tree on a hill with a cloud sea. Did Majora's Mask inspire? Nah, that can't be right. Aside from being gorgeous, this reveal is entirely sudden and a huge subversion of the expectations I think most players would have. The moon is served as this reminder of Termina's torment and imminent death constantly looming above, yet the inside is something of a dream. A paradise or Elysium that wraps you in a feeling of comfort and further portrays the tone of Majora's Mask. Again, we have another instance of happiness or oddity blurred by an overwhelming darkness, just as we have seen with the art style of the land of Termina and its inhabitants. Awaiting under the tree are 4 children wearing the boss's remains and 1 child sitting at the base with Majora's Mask. These kids serve as trial areas to test your skills with the various forms of Link, at the cost of a number of masks equivalent to their temple order, as well as Socrates' students. These moon children ask questions regarding if my friends think of me the same way, and if what makes me happy also makes others happy, and geez man, I'm already going through enough with this game. I'm not trying to have an existential crisis over here. Regardless, giving away all your masks, aside from the free transformation ones, will award you with the Fear's Deity mask when you speak with the child wearing Majora's Mask. This single mask has been the subject of so much interpretation and theorizing that it can be its own video. The child mentions playing good guys versus bad guys and how they will be the good guy. I want to comment on the camera work here, since when you receive the mask, in typical Zelda fashion, it shows a high angle shot, which is usually used to show vulnerability or weakness. The shot of Majora's Mask that follows is a low angle shot that commonly gives the subject power or a heroic quality. This series of camera work is super subtle and meticulous, but greatly appreciated and effective in reinforcing the mask's view of itself. And then, the final battle. While it might not be the most difficult final boss, the encounter with Majora within the moon is a perfect depiction of the entity's pure chaos, as well as the manifestation of the game's tone. The final boss is broken up into 3 forms that each elicit a particular feeling. Majora's first form is simply a large version of the mask itself, accompanied by the remains of the 4 bosses. The way it floats and the tendrils can be unsettling, but most of its attacks and demeanor are relatively tame, as reinforced by the music that gives a feeling of, alright, this is it. It's not until we get to the second form, Majora's incarnation, that things get interesting. Majora grows slender, long limbs, gains a horned eye, and starts making high-pitched bizarre noises, which is supplemented by a weird version of Majora's theme. They also moonwalk. What the heck? This change was definitely unexpected, so pretty much a perfect representation of Majora. Incarnation is a goofy, unusual moment surrounded by a primarily serious and eerie situation just like the bulk of Majora's Mask. I find the addition of an audible voice actually contributes to the intelligent, humanistic perception of Majora, if the reveal at the Clock Tower or Children of the Moon weren't enough. Once you beat it, it's time for Majora's last form. It lets out a blood-curdling scream, which is joined by the sound of blood pumping as all of its limbs increase in mass and a new head. Despite the drastic change in appearance, Majora retains the same high-pitched voice, just with less chicken noises. I find this to be a strong undermining of a formula we see too often where a deeper voice accompanies a size growth, and it reaffirms that Majora will always be the personification of chaos no matter what shape it takes. In this form, Majora's movements are more calculated and precise, but it does have times where it will thrash around violently. The music is reflective of this juxtaposition, as it's a really fast, aggressive version of Majora's theme that retains the usual structure, with a couple notes that seem to be tacked on in certain areas. All 3 forms of Majora compile into what I believe is a perfect portrayal of the game's blended tone, and the image of the mask that we built through the game by piecing together the stories. Its nature is purely chaotic, and a blend of irregularity and terror. This battle is a great finisher of the Link's long journey, and after several well-placed sword strikes, the evil is defeated and cast away. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask isn't just a game, it's an experience. It's an adventure that extends past the confines of the cartridge, and the game's design mimics that of its production. Similarly to Aonuma's time crunch and race against the clock to meet Miyamoto's challenge to develop a new Zelda title in a year, the player must combat and properly manage the element of time in Majora's Mask. And just as Aonuma revisited and reused assets as well as characters from Ocarina of Time, so does the player as they constantly rewind time in an effort to stop Majora. But most importantly, Majora's Mask establishes a definitive, expansive tone that feels fully integrated into every single aspect of its design, rather than something thrown on haphazardly. It's melancholy and bleak without a doubt, but littered with strong emotional moments that create flashes of light, no matter how fleeting. Those wacky, zany interactions like Guru Guru or Mikau's guitar solo, they only strengthen Majora's Mask's identity and somehow complement the somber tone. It's a Zelda title that's meant to invoke a deep connection with one's emotions and introspection through the parallel of dark themes and an offbeat world. And that's how The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask perfects tone. Dawn of the new day. Hey everyone, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope you enjoyed it. As I mentioned earlier, The Legend of Zelda is my favorite game series, just probably favorite series in general, and Majora's Mask I hold in a very high esteem. It's my favorite game of all time. I absolutely love it, and I've always wanted to do a video on it. Funny enough, actually, my first video I ever did on YouTube must have been like all the way back in like 2010, 2011 or something, was the beginning of a Majora's Mask Let's Play, so it's just kind of come full circle. I don't think those videos are up anymore. I think it was on a channel I deleted long ago, which is kind of unfortunate because I'm sure it's plenty cringe. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you wanted to leave a like or subscribe, as it really does help out the channel. It also lets me know if you want to see more Zelda content on the channel. I'm definitely going to be doing it, but it just kind of like lets me know like, oh, okay, this is you know, the speed or the frequency of it. I know a lot of people have been asking for Xenoblade Chronicles X videos. I'm actually playing that currently right now. I said I was going to do it this summer. I've just finished Chapter 6, and I just got my Skell. So I'm about halfway through, so I want to try and get a video just like, here are my thoughts now that I've finished it in comparison to when I first played it in 2015. I want to do that at some point and use some of the ideas that you guys have given to me. With regards to subscriptions, if you do want to subscribe or if you are already subscribed, I do recommend clicking the bell button as it will notify you just of the videos. I've had a couple people mention before that they didn't see a couple of my videos show up in their feed. If you want to see the videos more frequently, I do recommend doing that. If the quality in the Majora's Mask footage was a bit low, my apologies. I was actually recording off of my Wii. I typically like to record off of kind of like the physical hardware and not really use like emulators or anything if it can be avoided, but you know, if it is too much of an issue, I'll make sure that in the future to kind of remedy that. In terms of really just final words, I don't really have anything except for just like I'm continually stunned by, you know, just everything going on with this channel and just the progress that's really been made. It's just a lot of fun really talking with you guys, and I do appreciate all the kind words and all the support. It really does mean a lot to me, so thank you guys. But that's about it, so until next time.